Hey, everybody, it's Clint here, the Ivy League trucker, and we're back today here in early June after a bit of a break, I think about a month. And this is really the beginning of season two of Ivy League Trucker. In the beginning of this season, we're going to tackle some specific topics in trucking and explain what's going on with them and how it may or may not impact me and everybody else in trucking and folks outside of trucking as well. And today we're going to be talking about autonomous trucks. That's right, self driving trucks. You've all heard or about or seen or even ridden in an autonomous self-driving car. Waymo is piloting, not just piloting, but delivering service with autonomous taxis in San Francisco and some other California cities. And of course, Tesla has a self-driving mode, but you're still in the car. And so it begs the question, when is this coming to trucking, to class 8 or 18-wheeler trucking? Is it possible? Is it coming? When is it coming? Well, the answer is yes, yes, and yes. And it does exist right now. There are companies that are piloting it. And actually, as of May, just last month, May of 2026, there are two companies that are actually driving trucks autonomously, completely autonomously on commercial routes, delivering live commercial freight in the southwest portion of the United States. So it exists. And so it really begs the question, what does that mean for the trucking industry? What does that mean for the motoring public? And what does that mean for drivers and everybody else in the trucking industry? It's interesting. This topic, like many, is different from the inside of the industry than from the outside of the industry. I heard a story. There was a story in the Wall Street Journal around AI and various things AI will do to the economy and change the world. And one thing it mentioned in a long list of industries was trucking. And it said, oh, geez, the truck drivers, they're going to be completely out of work. They better start looking for other careers and career transitions now because they're gonna go away of telephone switchboard operators really fast. And when you look at it from the outside, you'd say, "Oh, yeah, sure." You get a self-driving semi and boom, the truck drivers are out of work and that's it. The reality from the inside of the industry is quite different. And today is gonna be a lot about that, about the details of the what is autonomous trucks and commercial trucking, why is it, who is it, what companies, where is it? And maybe most importantly, when is it? When is it going to impact the various segments of freight that are hauled across the United States and North America? That's what today's episode's about. So buckle up and we'll get into it. So, what is autonomous trucking or self driving tractor trailers? Well, it's a truck that can drive itself on roads without a driver. So the question is, how does it do that? What is the technology that allows this to happen? What has happened is this technology has been retrofitted onto existing tractors, existing tractor trailer rigs. So as you might imagine, your car already has probably a forward-looking radar to help with avoiding things and automatic braking to not have a collision with a stationary or slow-moving object. So there are radars, and they look everywhere, sideways, backward, forward, etc. So there's a lot of those. And then they also have something called LiDAR, or light emitting detection and ranging, whereas radar is radio emitting detection and ranging. And a LiDAR unit emits hundreds of thousands of pulses of light per second and measures the time based on the speed of light that it bounces back. And what it does is it creates a detailed 3D map of everything that it sees out in front or to the side of the truck. And it creates a 3D map of the world around the vehicle. So LiDAR is a huge part of this. And I believe it's the LiDAR that can actually read street signs, the various, different colors in a street sign. It can read like speed limit 35 miles per hour, which is pretty amazing. And then, of course, there's AI in the truck and a computer in the truck. And then it's also continuously connected via GPS type satellite link to an operating center, which has more computing capacity and also has the human operators that are monitoring the trucks. So you put all that together, you've got a self-driving vehicle, and it can program both the primary route and a backup route continuously as it goes down the road. So that's autonomous trucking. The question you got to ask is why is it? Why is it coming? Well, it's coming because of efficiency and predictability and safety improvements in trucking. And the efficiency improvement is primarily the cost of the driver. The pay and benefits, financial cost to a trucking company, that's about 40% of their cost structure, meaning 40% of all the costs incurred by a trucking company are driver pay and benefits. Another roughly 35 to 40% is fuel cost. And then the other 20% is maintenance and insurance and headquarters staff and all that. So if you can eliminate the driver pay and benefits and have it be replaced by a cost structure, which is just what it costs to run the autonomous truck, either the fixed cost of buying a much more expensive unit or, the ongoing costs, that's a lot less, obviously. So you're reducing your cost. And so efficiency and economic gain is the number one driver, like most things. Also, predictability and utilization, meaning human drivers have to rest. I can only work 14 out of every 24 hours. I have to take a 10-hour break after 14 hours, meaning the truck is sitting. Whereas if you have an autonomous truck, it's pretty much rolling continuously. So you get a lot more usage out of an individual truck. The other one is safety. A computer driven truck is not going to get distracted, is not going to yawn, is not going to get sleepy, is not going to get angry, is not going to have road rage, etc. And so it is inherently safer, much like self driving cars at scale are inherently safer as far as accidents per mile driven. And the other one is predictability. You will get more predictability because you won't have the variations of individual drivers, their driving styles and the differences between individual drivers. So all of that equals more efficiency, meaning better profitability per mile for a trucking company. So that's really what's driving it. But as you might imagine, there are many barriers to the introduction of this technology, and we'll get into that. Who is it? Meaning, who are the companies that are doing it? There really are two companies that are leading the way in this. And the first is Aurora, Aurora, and they are a self-driving technology company with applications beyond just trucking into other industries. But they're partnered with Volvo, and they started piloting about a year ago in 2025 Dallas to Houston route. And just last month, in May of 26, they started carrying live commercial freight, about one truck a day between Dallas and Houston. And I think they have a Oklahoma City route as well. Also, importantly, they partnered with Hirschbach, which is a good sized trucking company. And Hirschbach reportedly has ordered 500 autonomous trucks. Now, Hirschbach probably has 3,000 to 5,000 trucks of its own. So that's about 10% of their fleet size. That's pretty significant. And it's the first large order in the United States. And it'll be for a Texas customers and Texas utilization. The other company is Kodiak, Kodiak. Kodiak is partnering with Roll, Roehl, Roll Trucking, for some Dallas to Oklahoma City routes, which they just launched this past May. So these are very small numbers of trucks right now, but this is not with a pilot driver monitoring it. It's a fully autonomous truck that's connected to an operations center. And they are in the dry van lane, meaning, the normal box vans. And so they're carrying either probably just stuff on pallets, normal freight. And we'll talk about what segments or lanes of trucking, the predictions on when autonomous trucks may get to those lanes and what the barriers for each one would be. There's some other companies, Stack AV, Torque, TORC, that are playing, but it's mostly Aurora and Kodiak, which are leading the way. So those are the companies that are doing it. And from a truck manufacturer perspective, all of the major manufacturers, Volvo, Freightliner, Peterbilt, all the others, they all have bolted on, these various systems to their trucks and have a version of it. But I think it's probably Volvo which is leading the way. in this area, which doesn't surprise me. They're kind of the most tech savvy of all the major manufacturers. And then the question becomes, where is it? Where is it going to happen? And it's happening in the Southwest U.S. So it's happening in Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico. And the reason for that is, I think, pretty obvious. It's the weather and the condition of the roads. So you've got good, smooth, well paved, not beat up roads that are beat up by ice and snow and potholes down there. The weather's good and predictable. You don't have a lot of rain and snow and fog and ice. Also, those states, from a regulatory standpoint, are a little bit more progressive and forward thinking. And we'll talk a little bit about the barriers in the latter half of this episode, but places with bad weather are really going to be some of the last places that have autonomous trucks. So, Canada in February, not so much. Then the question becomes, when is it? We'll talk in detail about when it's coming by lane of trucking, whether that be dry van or refrigerated, or what I do, which is liquid bulk, petroleum products or food products or cattle hauling or whatever. It's starting in the simplest, lowest cost, lowest risk area, which is the dry van carrying dry goods and non-hazardous, non-flammable, non-liquid stuff is where it's starting. And each particular lane will have its own barriers to that. So let's talk about the barriers to adoption of autonomous trucking. This is the big difference between being on the outside of the industry and on the inside of the industry. From the outside, it seems pretty simple. As soon as you get the technical capability to have self-driving trucks, boom, the drivers are done. Everybody does it. There you go. Well, it's not that simple. So there are a number of barriers, and I would classify them in these areas. First would be technical. That's like the sensors and the technology. Second would be economic. Then there's cultural or public, the culture, people adopting this as being a norm. There's legal barriers. A big one is regulatory, the regulations and the regulatory bodies being able to adopt a framework for the use and regulation of autonomous trucking. And the last would be probably insurance and liability. So let's take them in order. So, technical, what do I mean by that? So, that's the technology itself. We talked about the sensors, radar, LiDAR, cameras, etc. It's no secret that the initial piloting of all of this technology is in the Southwest US, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona. The roads there, the interstates and the roads are fairly flat, newer, in really good shape. They're not potholed by bad weather. You don't have snow and ice and rain and fog very much. It's mostly clear sky conditions. So that's a lot easier for the sensors. So the converse, the barrier would be places that have bad weather. Canada in February, the northeastern United States, the northern third of the country across the Great Plains and the mountain states. There you get snow and ice and fog. And for example, many times I've been driving on a rural route in Canada in January or February, and there's nothing but snow on the ground, and there are no lines. The road is completely snow covered. There are no edge lines, no center line, no nothing. So there's really nothing for the sensors to see, to follow in the road, not to mention sensors keep getting covered up by slush and snow and ice. So they would all have to be heated, which I don't think they are now. So could they technically overcome a lot of this? Yes, but it's going to take a lot longer. What about accidents and unusual road conditions and debris in the roadway and police stopping vehicle? What about urban driving environments where it's tight and there's a lot of things in and around the roadway? So those are all technical barriers that could be overcome, but they're going to have to be overcome for urban and winter type driving conditions. Another area of barrier would be economic. So we talked about the economic reasons driving the whole thing of getting to autonomous trucking, efficiency, don't have to pay drivers, et cetera. But a big economic barrier is the cost of the units. So an average new tractor or truck is around $200,000. The current cost of the same truck outfitted as an autonomous truck is nearly double. It's like $375,000 or more. So this nearly double unit cost is gonna greatly delay the adoption, by mid-size and smaller size carriers. So, a big, huge trucking company like a Hirschbach or a Schneider or a Werner or XPO, one of them, they can amortize the cost across, their entire enterprise. They've got much deeper pockets with cash. They can afford these units. And again, they'll be cheaper to operate, but there's the initial acquisition cost, whether it's even leased, the lease price, or the acquisition cost. So, for example, my company is a very average trucking company, about 100 trucks, family run, and self finance. They're not going to they're not going to buy these trucks anywhere near the beginning of the adoption curve. They're going to be late adopters. The structure of the industry is the mega carriers, the big ones that have more than 1,500 trucks up to like 10,000 trucks, they only represent about 20% of all the trucks on the road. So 75, 80% of the trucks on the road are smaller companies from 300 trucks down to 5 trucks. The economics for them are quite different. So that's a big economic barrier. Also, there's the transfer hubs, meaning, the place where on the outskirts of Dallas, where the local pickup driver gives the trailer to the autonomous vehicle to take it down the interstate in the middle miles to the transfer station near the destination, and then it's the reverse, give it to a local driver. That you gotta build it, you gotta maintain it and all that. And then there's just the maintenance cost and the training and all that for companies. One area that's very hard to predict is cultural adoption, meaning when will the public be comfortable with 40-ton trucks cruising down the road all around you on the highway and on local roads? It's going to be technically safer overall from a general risk perspective, but you're going to have some accidents, some deaths that will be publicized. And will that kill it completely, or what it'll do to the regulatory, the political environment? It's very hard to predict. Some new technologies get adopted very quickly, and others never make it because the public just can't accept it. So I have no idea on that one, but it's going to be significant. Then there's legal. It's a different legal liability framework, right? You don't have a driver involved, so I guess that's good. You can't sue the driver, but initially, I mean, you need legal. No states, I heard a story about this. No states have any framework for how to deal with an accident with an autonomous truck. I mean, I guess the trucking company's liable, but is it the manufacturer of the technology? Is it the trucking company? Et cetera, et cetera. So all that has to be developed and piloted. And then the biggest one, I think, is going to be regulatory, meaning the regulations which are developed to oversee the use and supervision and regulation of autonomous trucks. So you've got the United States Department of Transportation, and under that, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, which regulate, safety and compliance in trucking. So they're going to have to develop a whole framework, and then each individual state is going to have their own framework. And then internationally, Mexico and Canada, because we're just talking about North America here, the way it usually works with regulations for Canada and Mexico is they follow the United States. So technologies get piloted in the much larger market and richer market, the United States, and then the Canada regulatory tends to follow next, and then Mexico's way behind. Think about it, for every new technology, whether it be forward-looking radars and their capabilities to stop accidents, or something as simple as the underride protectors on the back of trailers. It used to be you back-ended a trailer, the hood slid under the trailer, and you got decapitated through the windshield by the back of the trailer. Well, that was a problem. So started installing underride preventers, which is just basically a bar back there that keeps your car from sliding under the trailer. But the exact specifications and crash testing and all the regulations and approval had to be approved by the US federal system, all the states, and then later by Canada and Mexico. So something that's the simplest I can think of. Well, an autonomous truck and its capabilities and limitations and how it's regulated in Canada and Mexico is going to be interesting. It'll certainly follow the US, but how far behind, we have no idea. And then the last area would be insurance and liability. So even though once you get autonomous trucking adopted at scale, it's safer overall because you don't have distracted and tired and angry human drivers involved. But in the beginning, because it's so new, I would think the insurance rates would be much higher for the carrier, for the trucking company, and then maybe over time they'll reduce. But the overall thing is just getting an insurance company to write you a contract to insure you with an autonomous truck. So there's a lot to happen there. So that's actually a fairly short list of all of the barriers to entry, and each one of those will affect timing. I think my sense is this, that the technical and the insurance and the legal will probably be the early things to get figured out, but much further and longer will be the economic barriers or the cost of individual units for small companies, small trucking companies, and the regulatory framework and the cultural adoption. I have no idea on cultural adoption, but I think those will be much longer to figure out. So we've talked about the barriers to entry and those factors, but let's roll it all together and start to make some predictions. And like anything, predictions might not be worth the paper they're written on. But what I like to do here is make a prediction by each segment or lane of trucking on type of freight hauled for the adoption of autonomous trucking. And so I actually used AI for this. And AI has its limitations, but the benefit there is it pulls just about everything available on the internet for it. And I asked the AI, I said, when will autonomous trucking become prevalent in the various segments of trucking? And it came back and it said, here are my predictions and the pros and cons, and factors by each lane or segment, dry van versus liquid bulk versus cattle hauling or whatever. And when autonomous trucks will hit 20% of all the trucks in that lane. So it's only 20%, defined as, prevalent. It's out there. It's noticeable at 20%. That still means 80% of it's not autonomous yet. But here were the predictions. And so we'll go through each segment. So the first is, and these are ordered in the order of earliest adoption to latest adoption. And they're just predictions. But remember, this is recorded in June of 2026. So the first is general freight or dry van. Most of the trucks out there, the long, box van being pulled by a tractor. So this is where it was initially developed, and it'll be on that hub to hub model. And the idea here is it's first going to be in the Sun Belt and then gradually get to other areas. The key thing to unlock this would be a federal framework for interstate driverless operations, and that's not expected until middle to late 2020s, the end of this decade. So to get to 20% or prevalent, 2033, something like that, and then gradual adoption beyond that. What about refrigerated or reefer? This is your things that need to be kept cold. It's all your produce from the Central Valley of California or meat or any kind of refrigerated food product. It's pretty similar to dry van. So um, it would pretty much have the same adoption. Now, what about get a little unusual into the other segments? What about flatbed? These are the flatbed trailers that haul construction equipment and large, tractors and cranes and all that sort of stuff. This is where a human has to get up there and strap it and chain it and tarp it and do all of that. So that aspect, won't change. The only thing that could change is maybe some automated inspection. So it will probably be lag behind the dry van because you got more variables back there. Chains and tarps can get loose, loads can shift, and there's no human anywhere around to deal with that, to stop and adjust it and all that. The regulation right now is technically every 150 miles, they're supposed to stop and, tighten their chains using those pry bars to tighten their straps and chains. And you see them doing that on the side of the road. Well, can't do that with an autonomous truck. What about the area that I'm in, which is bulk liquids? So you can divide bulk liquids. That's the big, big tanker trucks. Um, You could divide bulk liquids into non-petroleum products. That would be everything from water to food products like milk or orange juice or that sort of thing. Um, and chemicals, actually, which there's there's thousands of industrial chemicals. And then there would be petroleum products, which would be fuel, gasoline, diesel, and oils and lubricating oils. So for non-petroleum products, you know, those products surge and slosh around, creating some unique driving environments that could be hard for the automated system to handle. Uh, and really, the validation of those systems and their ability to handle that would be interesting. But the big thing here is what you do loading and unloading. We load in all kinds of ways. We load from the top, we load from the bottom, we load pressurized. It gets dropped in the top or shoved through the bottom. And you got to hook up to it and various hookups at various customers. And then there's the offloading, which can be they do it, we do it. You got to find where to do it. You got to get to some interesting places on the backside of a industrial plant and shimmy in there and find the fitting and hook up to it. You got to monitor the pumping, do the pumping, pressurized, non-pressurized. You need a human for all of that. So at least the delivery and um, loading will keep humans involved significantly. When it comes, so the prediction there is 2038 to 2040, maybe something like that. Um, how about liquid petroleum products? This is things that can go boom boom and burn like fuel, like diesel. Uh, this is now you're carrying a lot of hazmat, hazardous materials, hazmat, which you have to have the placards, on the truck. You have to have a special training and regulatory certification for the driver, and it's a lot more dangerous if you spill gasoline or diesel or corrosive chemicals or toxic chemicals. So, from a regulatory standpoint and a safety standpoint, it's going to take a while, if ever, that this would be approved, not have a human on board to deal with any problems. Um, the AI says 2045. I don't know if it'll ever get there because it's just so, it's one thing to wipe out and spill a bunch of Cheetos on a roadway. It's something different when it's 6,000 gallons of gasoline that ignites, or it's 7,000 gallons of a toxic chemical that kills everything that swims, and you're right on top of a creek. So that's a different deal from a regulatory and safety standpoint. What about another segment, which would be cattle hauling or live animals? Well, this is a different type of cargo. It's alive. If you stop, it can overheat. If you keep it in there too long, it will die, etc. So there's a lot of that aspect, which I don't know if an automated system can handle, and then the loading and the unloading. So, not really sure how that would work. You'd have to have reliable biomonitoring systems for livestock for their welfare. And the realistic outcome is maybe partial automation for some middle miles, but anything around loading and unloading would have to be people. So maybe in the 2050s, if ever. And the last would be just general hazardous materials, right? Anything that can explode or burn or blow up or corrode or poison, especially in bulk quantities in a big tanker or even in boxed quantities. From a legal liability standpoint, from a safety standpoint, from a regulatory standpoint, don't know if you'll ever get there without taking a human completely. This thing's going to go 1,500 miles across the country and cross a bunch of state barriers and not have a human on board from a dealing with problem standpoint or accidents or issues. So you may never get there. In fact, my prediction is you won't get there. You have to keep a human involved. And then the last part is the weather piece and geography. And I can see where, you know, for example, now between in the months from late October until April 1st, if you're in the mountain states, in the Rocky Mountain states, you have to have chains, tire chains on board. And in many of the highways, as you start up the hill, all the trucks have to pull over, have to put the chains on when the sign, when the blinking lights say, "Hey, there's snow, you got to chain up." So I could see it be like that, that autonomous trucks would not be allowed to operate in those areas, or certain months of the year in Canada and the northern states, they just wouldn't be able to operate. But that introduces complexity because some of the year you've got autonomous trucks and the rest of the year you got to have drivers. So, um, from a technical standpoint, the LiDAR and the radar get significantly degraded by heavy precipitation and snow. Cameras can be blinded by snow glare and accumulation and gomming up the sensors. Maps and GPS systems can be degraded by weather. So it is my sense is that in Canada and in the snowy parts of the country, you may never see it fully automated trucks, or it'll only be during the better weather months. But it is a significant technical barrier for those areas. So that's got a quick rundown. Um, And the earliest adoption of the simplest, the dry van in the good, weather areas, we're talking 2033, maybe, 8, 7, 8, 9 years from now, and the rest significantly beyond it. So what does that mean? It means, yeah, it's going to come in some form or fashion to all parts of trucking, but will it, will, will drivers like me get put out of a job? No. And in fact, I'm kind of happy that I'm in the liquid bulk area in more the northern part of the country a lot, uh, is where we operate. And so I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be able to have a job and be employed for the foreseeable future. And also, I work for a smaller company who's going to be a very late adopter of autonomous trucking technology. But conversely, if you're working for a mega carrier with a lot of money, is operating in the southwest part of the country, and you're just hauling dry van, simple cargo, um, you might be concerned. Uh, and I would be very interested to talk to a Hirschback driver right now because that company is buying 500 autonomous trucks now to operate in Texas and New Mexico and Arizona. So we'll see. But I think it's going to really vary. So just to sum it up, we get to the question of so what? What does all this really mean, and why is it important or not important to the trucking industry, to all of us, and selfishly to me as a driver? I get the sense that the adoption of autonomous trucking will be a lot slower than the general media predicts, and it's going to be limited by those barriers that we talked about just in the last little segment there. The summary is that it's going to happen. It will happen for the same reason every technological innovation comes about and gets applied to every industry, is because it's more efficient, it's safer, it saves labor. By far and away, it makes economic sense. It's more profitable for the companies involved, and it increases their service level and makes them more profitable doing it. So it's going to happen. But I think it'll happen first in the dry van segments in the southwest part of the country. You know, start to see more of that in a hub to hub model by the end of this decade. Then it'll start to impact some of the other segments. But it will be interesting to see if it can ever significantly break into the northeast and northern part of the US that is snowy and cold and foggy and rainy and icy for a good part of the year, and for a lot of Canada. And then from Mexico, more from a regulatory and government environment, if they could ever get their act together to regulate it down there. So it's going to be a lot slower in those areas. And then from a cargo standpoint, the liquid products carried in bulk, and especially petroleum products and toxic liquids, would be some of the last areas, if ever. They may never be able to do it with an autonomous vehicle with no human involved to oversee things. Same with cattle hauling and livestock hauling, maybe the same way. You just need a human to be able to respond to what's going on back there with the health and welfare of the livestock. So it's going to happen, but it's going to happen a lot slower than the layman realizes. So what does that mean for me personally? It means I think I'm going to be employed for all the way through my retirement with the current company or a like company that is in the liquid bulk and petroleum products area, since that'll be one of the later areas or maybe never areas to be impacted by autonomous trucking. But it will roll into the industry and it will make things safer, and it will make things more profitable and more efficient. But will it reduce the overall number of drivers? I don't know. It will change the type of driving they're doing. There'll be a lot more local between, between the hub and into the city and the urban area type of driving and less of the long haul driving, which is being done by the autonomous trucks. I think that'll be the major impact. But I think you're always going to have drivers in some part of the or a significant part of the industry for all the reasons that we talked about. So that's it. Quick overview of autonomous trucking. It's kind of an interesting bleeding edge of technology, and it kind of encompasses both the technical side of it and the AI side of it. So I thought it might be of interest for you. And so the summary for me is I don't think it's going to change what I'm doing tomorrow or next year or 10 years from now, but it will start to impact some of the other drivers out there. So until next time, it's Clint, the Ivy League trucker. Keep that shiny side up.